I got cancer and couldn't take care of myself. My daughter said, "You favor boys over girls. You should ask your son to take care of you in your old age." My son said, "My wife doesn't agree to live with the elderly. Besides, you lent money to my sister. You should ask her to take care of you. I can only stay in the old house. And it's even difficult for me to get a drink of water. After I fell, the neighbor sent me to the hospital. And my 2 children were forced to come back to take care of me. When I woke up, I heard them saying beside me, 'Mom has cancer and it can't be cured. Why does she still insist on living? Living is both painful and costly. And it's just dragging us down.' Yeah. An old person who doesn't die is a burden. Can these seriously ill old people be more sensible? When they reach a certain age and get sick, can't they just die quietly? Do they have to make things difficult for their children? I shed tears and died from hunger strike. Then I was reborn. Before being reborn, I had a very long dream. In the dream, I returned to a certain scene from my childhood. The neighbor's family had 2 dogs that fought and got angry every day. The neighbor was miserable and would tell everyone, "The tempers of these 2 dogs I raised are just too bad." I said, "The dogs are so cute." The old grandpa sitting next to me asked with a smile, "Do you know why that person can't raise the dogs well?" I asked. "Why?" The old grandpa said, "Because her house is too small. Each dog needs a certain amount of space. Once the space is too small, the 2 dogs will definitely fight for territory." I nodded, half understanding. "Oh." The old grandpa continued. "And her income is not high. She's stingy when buying dog food. Over time, once the dogs see something good, they will scramble for it. She doesn't have time to accompany the dogs because of work. The dogs are cooped up in the house for a long time. And they will surely go crazy. She can't take care of everything herself. And she's in a bad mood. Which makes the dogs anxious too. Everyone blames the dogs. But actually the root cause lies with the owner. With her resources, she can only afford to raise 1 dog, but she insists on raising 2. In the end, neither she nor the dogs are happy. I was young at that time. So I ran to the neighbor who raised the dogs. Told her what the old grandpa said. And asked, "Auntie, can you give me one?" The aunt was silent for a long time and then said, "But these 2 dogs are both treasures. I can't bear to send either of them away." I was stunned and suddenly opened my eyes. I was standing in the living room. My husband Jeremias, who had long since passed away, was sitting on the sofa in silence. Outside the window was the pitch-black night. After a while, my husband looked up and said, "Grace, Hudden Sisai, do we really have to divorce?" I was still immersed in the pain of my children expecting me to die, and didn't pay attention to him. I had exhausted all my efforts to raise the 2 children. But they were actually both unwilling to take care of me. They even said, seriously ill old people should just die quietly. Thinking about all the hardships over the years and the desolation in my old age, my tears welled up. Seeing me crying, Jeremias panicked and knelt down, hugging my legs and saying, "Grace, let's not divorce. Okay?" I was wrong. I swear I'll never go worrying again. I got angry when I saw him and slapped him hard, saying, "It's all your fault. Everything is your fault." Jeremias quickly apologized. Yes, fulfill my obsession. It's all my fault." Looking at Jeremias' face, I hated him to death and was also extremely jealous. Because when Jeremias was seriously ill at the age of 60, both children paid and made efforts. Why, when it was my turn to have cancer, the children were unwilling to treat me and wished I would die soon? It's so unfair. Obviously, hading Tofdovayavsai, I'm the one who has put in more. Why do the children dislike me, but like their father who brought the family to bankruptcy, was often away from home, and even went warring? What on earth have I done wrong? Why treat me like this? Overwhelmed with grief, I burst into wailing and beat him hard. Caught warring by me, Jeremias didn't dare to fight back and just meekly agreed. "Dad. Mom." A small voice came from behind. I turned around and, through my tear-blurred eyes, saw my 2 young children standing timidly at the living room door. Presumably, our voices were too loud and woke them up. "Mom. Please don't hit dad anymore. Okay? My daughter summoned up the courage to say. I subconsciously glanced at the wall clock, which showed that it was already 2 and then shouted. What time is it, and you're still not sleeping? Don't you have to go to school tomorrow? The 2 children were so frightened that they quickly went back to the bedroom. I continued to cry. Gradually, I suddenly felt something was wrong. Why did this scene seem so familiar? After a night's rest, I finally realized that I had been reborn. I was back on the day when I proposed divorce to Jeremias for the 3rd time. Both Jeremias and I were muddle-headed people, but we never realized it. When we got married, Jeremias was young, promising, hadn't self-doubt, had a good income, and came from a good family. I also had a good image and a good job. We fell in love and got married smoothly and led a good life. In the first year of marriage, I quickly got pregnant and gave birth to my daughter Hal. At this time, many people would face a question whether to have a second child. At that time, the country advocated having a second child. Jeremias wanted a son, and both families advised me to have another one. I also thought 2 children were good, so without much hesitation, I got pregnant with a second child. I told Jeremias that whether it was a son or a daughter, I wouldn't have any more children. Jeremias agreed. When I was 3 months pregnant, Jeremias had problems at work and was almost unemployed. The family income dropped significantly. If I had made a decisive decision to give up the child at that time, perhaps there wouldn't have been what followed. But I was already 3 months pregnant. No one could easily give up this little life. So, we decided to give birth to our son Jagger. Unexpectedly, hadn't and Sasher. This was an extremely wrong decision. After giving birth to our son, Jeremias found the economic pressure was extremely high. To increase income, he started to start a business in partnership with others. He lost money from the start. To comfort me, he didn't use the money of our small family but secretly took money from his parents and continued to invest. Before long, the partner saw something was wrong and withdrew. I thought that since the partner had left and the future was uncertain, it was too risky for Jeremias to bear all the risks alone later. So I advised him to stop. He was muddle-headed and unwilling to give up. He continued to start a business with a fluke mentality and invested all the family's money. He also sent me the money from his parents every month, saying it was the profit he earned. To comfort me, when the matter was exposed, I realized that he had not only lost all the family's money but also borrowed money everywhere. The interest alone was a huge amount. Finally, hadn't me. When he couldn't hold it anymore, he confessed his guilt to us. At that moment, it felt like the sky had fallen. His parents had no choice but to sell the extra property and use their pensions to fill his hole. This incident was too much for my father-in-law with a weak heart, and he soon had a recurrence of heart disease and died. Our family went completely bankrupt. Jeremias became unemployed, and I had to work alone to support the family. With 2 children to feed, the pressure doubled. At that time, we realized what 2 children meant to a family. It meant a very high economic base, strong emotional controllability, as well as a lot of time and companionship. The family was short of money, and Jeremias and I often quarreled. During that time, we had fought about divorce twice because of various trivial problems. Jeremias later found a sales job with a decent salary, but he often went on business trips. My mother-in-law was old and had high blood pressure and diabetes. She could only do some housework. I had to handle all the affairs at home. Just picking up and dropping off the 2 children exhausted me. I couldn't take care of both my work and the children's education well, and I was extremely stressed. After enduring this for 2 years, I suddenly caught Jeremias worrying and proposed divorce for the 3rd time. That's this time. Jeremias knelt down and begged for mercy, arguing that it was to accompany the client and he made a mistake because he drank too much. In the previous life, we didn't divorce. It wasn't that I forgave Jeremias, but because of the children. At that moment, I understood what those people on the internet meant when they said that a family with more than 2 children was the most stable. If I had only one child, I could divorce and take the child away. But I had 2 children. If I divorced, I couldn't work and support them if I took both children. If I only took one, Which one should I give up? I couldn't bear to part with either. If I didn't take either, I wouldn't feel at ease with the children following their unreliable father. After much hesitation, I chose not to divorce. At least Jeremias could earn money. I never expected that after enduring so much, in my old age, I would raise two ungrateful children. Now that I'm reborn, I will definitely divorce and not take any children. Early the next morning, I walked out of the bedroom door. Jeremias had slept on the sofa last night and left very early today. He was always like this. Over the past few decades, he often went on business trips and was not at home. He sent some money on time every month and accompanied the children occasionally. I was the one who took care of the house at other times. Obviously, I was 100 times more hardworking than Jeremias. But the children liked their father and didn't like me. Two ungrateful brats. Thinking of this made me feel cold. My mother-in-law had already prepared breakfast and greeted me. Grace, having fulfilled my say, "Come and have breakfast." When the two children saw me, they said timidly, "Mom, I got angry when I saw these two ungrateful children." I pulled a long face and sat at the table without saying a word. There was only one steamed bun left on the table. My son reached for the chopsticks first. But my daughter was quicker and picked it up. My son started shouting, "My steamed bun! My steamed bun!" My daughter said, "You've already eaten two. And I've only eaten one. This one should be mine." My son said, "But you ate the spring roll." And I didn't. The two children were arguing over a steamed bun. My ears were almost numb from the noise early in the morning. I frowned and told them to stop. But they didn't listen at all. I glanced at the alarm clock. If they didn't hurry up, they would be late for school. Suddenly, I got angry. I was already annoyed with them. I slammed my chopsticks down and shouted, "What are you arguing about? It's just a steamed bun. Your sister has already taken it. What else are you arguing for?" My son felt harmed and cried, "The steamed bun should be mine." My mother-in-law couldn't stand seeing the child cry and scolded my daughter. "You're the elder sister. How can you fight with your younger brother for a steamed bun? You ate the spring roll, so you should let your brother have the steamed bun." My daughter also cried. "But my brother ate the banana left last night. There are 4 steamed buns today. He had 2. And I should have to too." They were still arguing. I roared, "1 steamed bun for each person. Grandma and I didn't eat any. Aren't you ashamed to fight? Hurry up and eat." The children were frightened. Under my coercion, the children stopped crying and ate obediently. But they were obviously unconvinced. Looking at this scene, I was really tired of it. They were always fighting. Sometimes it was for a banana. Sometimes for a steamed bun. Sometimes for a toy. They lived in one room with a bunk bed. We've had several arguments just over who sleeps on the upper bunk. When my son sleeps on the top, he often jumps around, which makes my daughter very angry. She would come to me in the middle of the night to complain. I was already extremely sleepy and had to go to work the next day. Yet I had to deal with their trivial matters. The room is small and can't fit 2 desks. So the 2 children share a slightly larger one. My daughter drew a demarcation line on it. We've lost count of how many times they've quarreled just over crossing this line. Ordinarily, having fulfilled my say, I could endure it. But in the morning, time is pressing. I have to send them to kindergarten before going to work. However, they never seem to understand how urgent my time is. They often can't get their clothes and shoes on properly. Or they make a fuss over trifles. Which makes me furious. I've really tried my best to be fair. But in the end, they both blame me for being biased. I'm truly tired of this. Thinking of this, I said coldly, "Hal, Jagger." The 2 children immediately sat up straight. I said, "Your father and I are going to get divorced. Mom can't afford to raise you. From now on, you'll follow your father." Previously, I was afraid of hurting the children, so I firmly refused to mention divorce. But after being reborn, I'm too lazy to take care of the fragile feelings of these ungrateful children. My mother-in-law turned deathly pale. "Grace, don't mention this in front of the children." I slammed my chopsticks down. "Why can't I say it? They'll have to know sooner or later anyway. My mother-in-law fell silent. The two children were stunned. Then ran to me crying and pleading. Mom, wait, we'll be very good. Please don't get divorced. Okay? I pushed them away without hesitation. Why not? I've endured for so many years because of you. If it weren't for you, why would I have to put up with all this? I've given so much. But you don't know how to be grateful. Ungrateful wretches. The two children burst into wailing cries. I slapped the table hard. What are you crying for? I haven't even cried yet. What right do you have to cry? The children were frightened and quickly stopped crying, looking at me timidly. Seeing this scene, my heart suddenly ached. My mother-in-law couldn't help but say, Grace, can you stop always losing your temper at the children? I was taken aback and got even angrier. What do you mean by always losing my temper at the children? Have I lost my temper except today? Huh? My mother-in-law seemed to want to say something but held back. After dinner, the children quickly went to get dressed and put on their school bags, waiting for me to send them to kindergarten. After the children left, my mother-in-law asked me, Grace, why did you suddenly mention divorce? I snorted. You know very well what your son did. Jeremias will change. You know he's not that kind of person. But he went warring. My mother-in-law thought for a while and said, Grace, it was the client who forced him to go. He made a mistake because he was drunk. Jeremias doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, is polite, gives money on time every month, and spends time with the children when he's free. He's more family-oriented than many men. I asked, giving money on time every month makes him a good man? How much does he give? My mother-in-law said, about 10,000 yuan a month. That's enough. Many people can't even earn 10,000 yuan a month. My anger flared up again. Yes. He gives me 10,000 yuan a month, but the mortgage is almost 5,000 yuan. With the remaining money, I have to raise two children and take care of everything at home. And from time to time, he asks me for money. My mother-in-law fell silent. Mom, we're ready. The two children came over and said, my mother-in-law, and stopped talking to me about divorce. I led the children out. Still angry. Jeremias does get 10,000 yuan a month and occasionally spends time with the children. In my previous life, after I divorced him, he stopped warring and often reported to me what he was doing. When others talked about him, it seemed like he was such a good man. He gave most of his salary to his wife on time every month, often reported to his wife, and spent time with the children when he was free. It seems pretty good, and 10,000 yuan is enough to support the family. But after deducting the mortgage, there are only 5,000 yuan left. Utilities and property management fees are a large sum of money. And there are the expenses for the two children. This already makes the family finances tight, and Jeremias often asks me for money. He says he has no money for gas, car insurance, or that he doesn't have enough money to treat clients. There are all kinds of reasons. He used to be from a wealthy family. Even after going bankrupt, he still hasn't changed his habit of being extravagant and trying to save face. He said he had to meet clients and was afraid of being looked down upon. So he insisted on buying a 1,000 yuan shirt. What kind of shirt is worth 1,000 yuan? Can the client see the shirt inside? Naturally, I disagreed. Jeremias said that sharp-eyed clients could tell the quality of the shirt. If his appearance was shabby, others wouldn't give him business. After going bankrupt, we often quarreled over these things. If I didn't give him money, he would borrow from online loans and use his credit card. Then he would tell me when he couldn't pay back the money. If he became a deadbeat, it would affect the children's studies. So I had to take out money to pay off his debts. After all these ins and outs, I had no money left in my hands. All these things make me feel extremely frustrated. In fact, my mother-in-law is right. I often get angry. But how can I not be angry? The financial pressure is so great. Work is not going well. My husband makes me angry. And the children also make me angry. Am I just born to be angry? I'm forced to be like this. Even when I'm angry, I try to hold it in and not lose my temper in front of the children. Yet the children still blame me for having a bad temper. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. I've been reborn. I don't want to live this kind of life for even a single day. On the way out of the community, the two children followed me obediently, secretly glancing at my face from time to time. Before, I would chat with them, but today I ignored them completely. Halfway, we met an aunt walking two dogs on the road. The two dogs were running around and barking. She was in a panic, shouting, "Stop running." I casually greeted her, walking the dogs. The aunt complained, "Yes, cusses are. These two dogs are really disobedient. They always fight. Their temper is too bad," I subconsciously said. "Then send one away." The aunt said, "I can't bear two." These familiar words made me stop in my tracks. The moment before I was reborn, I was dreaming about two dogs. At that time, I didn't realize anything. I was still immersed in grief and anger, full of resentment towards my children, determined to divorce and not want them, and live a carefree life. But now, when I recall that dream again, it seems to have some suggestive meaning. The aunt said, "Actually, I know it's not the dog's problem. My room is small, and I don't have much money. It's enough to raise one dog. Raising two will definitely cause problems." I was out of my mind to raise two at the beginning. Alas. Maybe one day when I can't take it anymore, I'll send one away. I opened my mouth. "Won't you be reluctant?" The aunt said, "If I had enough money, raising two would be no problem. But now the conditions don't allow it. Forcing to raise two will drive both people and dogs crazy. I have to make up my mind." The aunt left. My daughter tugged at the corner of my clothes and asked cautiously, "Mom?" I came back to my senses and silently took the two children to the kindergarten. After sending the children off, I didn't go to work but returned to the community. I walked while thinking. My house is relatively small. The two children live in one room, which is very crowded, due to financial constraints. I buy things in small quantities, and the two children often fight over them. With the great pressure of life, I'm often unworried and easy to get angry. When I reached the atrium, the aunt was still struggling to walk the dogs. Looking at her, I seemed to see myself. I suddenly thought, the two children were quite well behaved when they were young. Why did they become ungrateful? Did God let me dream of that scene and remind me in reality to tell me that parents are the root of the problem? Is He trying to tell me that I shouldn't have had two children? Is it because I had two children but didn't give them enough space, sufficient material, or good emotions that made the children ungrateful? Indeed, if I only had one child, everyone wouldn't have to be so tired. But when I had the second child, the family hadn't gone bankrupt. We lived in a big house and had enough to raise two children. Later, when the family conditions were poor, I endured so much for the children and tried my best to take care of them. Why should I be blamed? After returning home, I locked myself in the room. I felt both wronged and thought that God must have a reason. He was already kind enough to give me a chance to be reborn. I can't just ignore His hint. Having nothing to do, I found a lot of parenting books to study. The company called me and asked why I didn't go to work. I said weakly, "I'm sick." The supervisor didn't blame me and asked me to take a leave. I still need to make money to support myself even if I get divorced. This job is quite good, and I don't want to lose it. So I pulled myself together and filled out a leave application. At 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I was too lazy to move, so I asked my mother-in-law to pick up the children. My mother-in-law was taken aback. "Me?" I said. "Yes, why so?" "You. From now on, you'll pick up and drop off the children. Helen Jagger's cram school is suspended." My mother-in-law asked, "Why suspend the classes?" I said coldly, "Doesn't your son know how much he earns? You said he gives me 10,000 yuan. Implying that it's a lot and enough. As if I'm greedy for money. And don't go to the cram school. Save where you can. It will surely be enough in the future." My mother-in-law had an embarrassed look on her face and didn't refute. She went downstairs to the kindergarten. The kindergarten I chose for the children allows for late pickup. However, the children have to attend the cram school organized by the kindergarten after school at 4 o'clock, and they need to pay an extra 600 yuan per month. For two children, that's 1,200 yuan. Jeremias gives me 10,000 yuan. The mortgage is 5,000 yuan. And the kindergarten fees add up to more than 3,600 yuan per month. Just these two items take up almost all the money. The remaining living expenses and miscellaneous fees all depend on my salary. It seems like it's my fault that the 10,000 yuan is not enough to spend. Before, I was worried about my mother-in-law's health and whether she could take care of the two children. I was afraid something might happen on the way. So I insisted on picking up and dropping off the children myself. Now let her do it. If something happens on the way, it has nothing to do with me. Without having to pick up and drop off the children, I went to the company very early the next day and worked seriously. The supervisor said, "Can you stay and work overtime today?" I said without hesitation, "Yes." Before, I just wanted to pick up the children early. So I never worked overtime and took leave to deal with the children's affairs. Naturally, I had no chance of getting promoted or a raise. Now I have to plan for myself. When Jeremias comes back, I'm going to officially divorce him. I got home very late from work. The children no longer made noise and became extremely sensible. I was too lazy to pay attention to them. But they became even more afraid. Yes, I didn't fulfill my obsession. Afraid. But I really didn't do anything. I didn't scold anyone. During a meal, the children didn't touch the vegetables. I took a look and asked, "Why aren't you eating?" They asked, "Mom, can we eat?" I was taken aback and frowned. "Did I stop you from eating?" They shook their heads, reached for their chopsticks to pick up some vegetables, and stole glances at my expression. Suddenly, I remembered that this kind of situation often occurred in my past life. The children were afraid of me. As they grew older, they became more and more silent during meals. Whenever I tried to chat with them, they would just respond with, "Mehem" or "Aha," as if they had nothing to say to me. I felt both helpless and angry, not knowing what to do. After they grew up and moved out of the house, even if we were in the same city, they rarely came home. They also became more and more impatient with me. I really don't know what went wrong. Forget it. Whatever. Let them be. After that, I not only stopped picking up and dropping off the children, but also stopped caring about their after-school homework. That's right. There was even after-school homework in kindergarten. I directly added my mother-in-law to the parents' group and quit myself. I didn't care about anything. I also cooked only the dishes I liked. One day, having fulfilled my obsession, my son threw a tantrum and refused to eat. I said, "Are you going to eat or not?" He stubbornly turned his head away and said, "No." I lifted my eyelids slightly. "Fine. If you don't want to eat, then don't." With that, I directly poured his meal along with the leftover dishes into the trash can. My son was stunned. "Mom," I said, "you were the one who refused to eat." My son sobbed in the living room. I turned on the music on my phone, turned the volume up to the maximum, then closed the kitchen door, and slowly washed the dishes while listening to the music. Surprisingly, doing some housework while listening to music was actually quite relaxing. For several consecutive days, I didn't pick up and drop off the children, didn't urge them to do their homework, didn't urge them to go to school, and didn't urge them to go to bed. I felt extremely relaxed, and my mood gradually improved. At first, the children were a bit scared, but when they saw that I really didn't pay attention to them, they came over and clung to me again. I said, "Go play by yourselves." They were playing around and accidentally hit the TV with a ball. The children were frightened and peeked at my expression. The TV was bought for 20,000 yuan when we got married. In the past, I would have felt very distressed and angry when I saw them hitting it. But now, since I didn't regard this place as my home, I couldn't be bothered to care. When they saw that I didn't intervene, they let loose and played wildly later. My daughter was about to start primary school and was a bit more mature. She came over and hugged me, saying, "Mom, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. I love you." I was stunned. She actually said she loved me. I remembered that in my past life, my daughter had said she loved me when she was very young. But she never said it again after that. I asked, "Why are you being so cheesy all of a sudden?" My daughter said, "Because Mom has become better." I sneered. Just because I hadn't been taking care of you recently, I'd become better? You like this? My daughter nodded. Yes, Cutis, I do. My son also said. I like it. I sneered inwardly. They really are just naive kids who don't understand anything. If adults don't care about anything, you'll have a hard time later. We all like it when mom doesn't get angry. My daughter said innocently. I took a deep breath. Is that so? So you like me like this? My daughter asked with a smile. Mom, have you been in a good mood recently? I said. Why do you think so? My daughter said. You don't get angry as often. I paused. Did I get angry a lot before? My daughter said. Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. You often did. She pulled a long face, wrinkled her forehead into a deep Sichuan character shape, and turned her lips down. My son also imitated me, widening his eyes. And like this. The two kids looked quite funny imitating an adult getting angry. I couldn't help but laugh. But then I stopped. A deep thought flashed through my mind. I thought that by trying to control my temper and not scolding the children, they wouldn't know I was angry. But my expressions had been making the children feel oppressed and scared. I asked, so you're afraid of me? The two children looked at each other for a moment, then nodded cautiously. My son said, Mom and Dad often quarreled, and Mom even hit Dad. It was so scary. I defended myself. That's because Dad did something wrong. And we always quarreled after you fell asleep. We didn't want to scare you. My daughter said. But we could hear you every time you quarreled. Several times. We heard you shouting and scolding Dad. I fell silent. Every time I quarreled with Jeremias, it was indeed my voice that was louder. But Jeremias was the one who did something wrong. I asked. In your eyes, does it seem like Mom is bullying Dad? The two children nodded. My heart ached. And I couldn't help but laugh. But as I laughed, I felt like crying. No wonder in my past life. The two children liked their father and took care of him when he was ill. But when it came to me, they didn't even come back to take a look and were even hoping I would die. In their eyes, their father gave a lot of money to support the family every month, played with them whenever he was free, made them happy, and had a good temper. Such a good father was often bullied by their mother. Their mother was always losing her temper, looking gloomy, and always bossing them around. She was really annoying. I desperately wiped away my tears, trying not to cry out. But my voice couldn't help but rise. Do you know why I hit Dad? The two children showed a timid expression again. I couldn't hold back and said, because your father went warring. The two children showed expressions of surprise. The more I talked, the more excited I became. The reason Mom was always angry was that your father spent all the money, and there was no money left in the family. He also often asked me for money to buy expensive things. That's why we quarreled. In my past life, I always didn't want to put pressure on the children. Everyone said not to speak ill of the other half in front of the children, for fear that the children would lack a sense of security in the future. They also said not to emphasize how poor the family was in front of the children, because the children would become inferior and their hearts would be hurt. I protected the children's childhood, but in the end, they treated me like that. Thinking of their unfilial appearance, my heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Your father betrayed me, and it was right for me to hit him. Before, when you hit the TV, it cost hundreds of yuan to repair it each time. Naturally, I was angry because there was no money in the family. How much do you spend on food and drinks? Do you blame me? You ungrateful brats. Do you think you've treated me fairly? I rambled on for a while without caring. The two children looked at me timidly. I stopped talking. Their expressions reminded me of my past life. After the two children grew up in my past life, when I thought they could handle it mentally, I gradually told them about the family situation and expressed my grievances. They were very annoyed. Later, they even shouted, "Got it. Got it. Can you stop talking about it? You've said it hundreds of times." Naturally, I was angry when I heard that. The saddest thing for a mother is that she always repeats the trivial things of the past, expecting the children to understand. But the children may not necessarily understand. and you can't keep repeating. Once you repeat too much, the children will become more and more irritable. Just like now. I was crying and shouting at them, telling them about my grievances. But they didn't react. After a while, my son asked cautiously, Mom, having fulfilled my essay, what does worrying mean? I opened my mouth. In an instant, I felt a deep sense of powerlessness. What on earth was I doing? Why did I expect them to understand? Why did I make accusations? It was just embarrassing myself. I turned around and went into the room to read a book. The book said that a mother must control her emotions, be herself, and make herself happy in order to create a pleasant atmosphere and make the children happy too. I smiled bitterly. In my past life, I sacrificed a lot for the two children. I tried my best to raise them until they became adults. I originally thought I could finally relax. But then Jeremias got seriously ill. Even if the surgery was successful, someone had to take care of him all the time. Who could that person be? It could only be me. Surely I couldn't ask the two newly graduated children to come home and take care of their father? I resigned myself to taking care of him for 8 years. And finally Jeremias passed away. I thought I could enjoy a peaceful life. But unexpectedly, after Jeremias left, the family fell apart. The two children no longer came home. And I, an old person, was left living alone. Only then did I realize that they used to come home only for their father. Not for me. But when the children came home, it was me who cleaned the room, me who went to the vegetable market to buy groceries, and me who did the housework. In the end, I was the one who was unwelcome? It's so unfair. How could anyone be happy when they'd been suffering and wronged their whole life? Thinking of all the things in my past life, I couldn't help but cry again. After crying for a while, I wiped away my tears. It doesn't matter. Now that I've been reborn, I won't give any more. I'm going to be selfish. Only selfish people can live a good life in this world. Ever since I shifted all my focus to work, the looks on the faces of the supervisor and the manager have improved. Once, I stayed behind to work overtime alone. Coincidentally, the manager dropped an important document and needed it to be sent to the airport. Seeing that there was not enough time, he called for someone in the group. I saw it and immediately took a taxi to the airport and delivered it in time, which helped him a great deal. After that, I caught the manager's eye. Coincidentally, there was a salary adjustment this month, and my salary increased by almost 500 yuan. The manager also said he would promote me to supervisor. I thought it was just talk, because the supervisor was doing a good job, so how could I be promoted? But unexpectedly, the opportunity for promotion came soon. On Wednesday, an old woman suddenly rushed into the office, shouting and yelling, "What's wrong with your company? You always make my daughter work overtime and don't give her a break. She can't even get married." Everyone was stunned. The supervisor quickly rushed over to pull her. "Mom, what are you doing?" The old woman ignored her and kept shouting, demanding to see the manager. Finally, having fulfilled the supervisor cried and begged her. "Mom, stop making a scene. Please leave quickly." The old woman said righteously, "Didn't you say the company always makes you work overtime? They're in the wrong. Why can't I make a scene? You missed the last blind date because of work, and you missed yesterday's blind date because of overtime again. What a lousy company. It's delaying your marriage. And that's a big deal." The supervisor got anxious. "What marriage? I want to work. I don't want to get married." The old woman also got anxious. "Work isn't as important as getting married. Do you know how old you are? You're 35. A woman over 35 can hardly have children. Don't you know that?" The supervisor said stubbornly. "Then I won't have children." "Old lady, not having children? Who will take care of you in your old age? You can manage on your own now. But what about when you're old? What if you get Alzheimer's and someone takes your money away? You might even die in some corner, and no one would know. Do you think your company will provide for your old age? Dream on. They're already exploiting you and can't possibly make you work more overtime." The supervisor couldn't hold her back. The old lady rushed into the manager's office and made a huge scene, even threatening to report to the labor department. The supervisor broke down and cried in the office. She tried her best to pull the old lady away. After this incident, colleagues talked about it in private. Someone said, "She's 35 and still not married. Her mother must be worried. It's understandable that she came to the company to make a fuss today." Someone else said, "No matter what, she shouldn't have made such a ruckus. Where does that leave her daughter's face? The way parents handle things is wrong. Even if their intentions are good, it's still wrong." I was taken aback. Suddenly, I remembered the arguments I had with my daughter in my previous life. At that time, she fell for an unreliable man. I was very worried and forced her to break up. That time, we had a very unpleasant fight. I thought I was right and argued with her vehemently. After my son graduated, he wanted to go to big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, or Guangzhou to make a living. A friend of mine had an opportunity in their company. The company was excellent, and I thought it was a rare chance. So I forced my son to come back and join the company. We also argued for a long time about that. Later, my daughter's ex-boyfriend got into trouble and was arrested. My daughter was lucky to get out of that relationship. My son came back and joined the company, got a high salary, and even became a leader. I thought my decisions were brilliant and often said to the two children, "See? Listening to mom doesn't do you any harm." The two children would nod and say yes every time, and then fall silent. Now, seeing what the supervisor's mother did, I suddenly realized that perhaps my intense actions back and had offended the children. Even if my intentions were good, could it still hurt the children? Before long, the supervisor resigned. On the day she left, I specially invited her to dinner. She was surprised for a moment and then happily accepted the invitation. After having a few drinks, the supervisor became talkative. "You still have time to invite me to dinner? Don't you need to pick up your children?" I said. "No need," she said. "Grace, I'm leaving. You should be the one to become the supervisor now." I said. "Impossible, right?" She said. "Actually, the company originally wanted to promote you. Your business is good, and your work ability is strong. But unfortunately, you refused to work overtime and often took leave to take care of your children. So they chose me instead." I was stunned for a moment, not knowing how I felt. I really sacrificed a lot to take care of my two children. The supervisor said, "This time I'm leaving. With your outstanding performance and being an experienced employee, the company will definitely promote you." She babbled on and then inevitably mentioned her mother. "Why does she always do this to me?" The supervisor suddenly burst into tears. "She always forcefully interferes with my decisions. I'm not a child anymore. I'm 35 years old. I hate her. Really hate her. She always says others in society will bully me. But the one who often bullies me and makes me cry in this life is her. I'm going to resign and go to another city. I'll never come back." She told her story while drinking. Her father was irresponsible, never stayed at home, and didn't earn money. She grew up in an environment full of quarrels. Later, her mother finally divorced her father and left with her. It was very hard for her mother to raise her. She was grateful, but her mother had a strong desire for control, which often made her feel wronged. I felt very heavy-hearted listening to her. Obviously, having fulfilled Wi. The supervisor was in great pain. She had long planned to live in another city, away from her mother. However, she had been hesitating because of her mother's kindness. Her mother oft unmorally blackmailed her, saying that she had sacrificed so much for her. If she didn't stay by her side, she was an ungrateful wretch. Her mother also interfered in her making friends, and forced her to go on blind dates and get married. All these things made her feel suffocated. After her mother made a big scene at the company this time, she finally made the decision to leave completely. Listening to the supervisor talk about her family affairs, the more I heard, the more familiar it seemed. When she calmed down, I tried to persuade her. "Your mother has actually been through a lot. She had a hard time when she was with your father. And she still had a hard time after the divorce. When she can't control her emotions, she can only vent her pain to her closest daughter. But she loves you," the supervisor retorted. Pain and grievance are not reasons to hurt children. Her words were like a wake-up call. I was stunned. The supervisor said. She has suffered and knows how painful it is. Why does she have to impose that pain on me? Most of the pain wasn't caused by me. Why does she hurt me? I asked blankly. Did she hurt you? Forcibly controlling me. Scolding me. Morally blackmailing me. Constantly making me her emotional punching bag. Aren't these forms of harm? I'm a living person. Not a dog she raises. Now I figured it out. Parents who have suffered and then make their children suffer are selfish and heartless. I've done more than enough. I won't feel guilty for leaving her. I was silent for a moment and then said, but you're already feeling guilty now. She was taken aback. Then burst into wailing cries and shouted at me. Why does she do this to me? Can she do whatever she wants under the pretext of being good for me? Why do I feel guilty even before I leave? Why do I have to be in so much pain? In a trance. Through her almost distorted face from crying, I seemed to see my daughter in my previous life crying and shouting at me. Why do you do this to me? I'm not thinking about my ex-boyfriend anymore. I just don't want to get married for now. Please stop bothering me. Okay? What's wrong with not getting married at 30? I also saw my son's almost pleading face. Mom. Stop talking. Okay? I know more about work than you. Please stop forcefully interfering in my affairs. Okay? What was I thinking at that time? I was thinking that I had endured so much suffering. Given so much for them. And everything I did was to pave the way for them. Why were they going against me? And then I would argue with them. The supervisor's repeated interrogations were strongly impacting my heart. I didn't understand before. But now I finally did. I covered my face. My eyes slightly sour. Sorry. Mom was wrong. I stood up and hugged the child in front of me. She cried even louder. 77 After the supervisor resigned, the company indeed promoted me. In the manager's office, I said a bit nervously, Manager. I've never been a manager before. And I've never managed anyone. I don't know if I can do a good job, but I will study hard. Communicate more with my subordinates. And be a good supervisor. The manager smiled and said, Grace, heading full sailed by Decisive. Don't sell yourself short. Your abilities are obvious to all. And who says you've never managed anyone? I was puzzled. He said, Don't you have 2 children? They are naturally your subordinates. And children are the most difficult to manage. So of course you're a manager. Coming out of the office, I returned to my workstation. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the effective executive in the file rack. I picked up the book and flipped through a couple of pages. The manager's words came to my mind. You're the mother of 2 children. Their manager. I had never thought in this way before. Everyone knows that to become a manager in a company, you need to accumulate experience first. Keep learning. And finally be competent. In a management position, you must reflect on yourself every day. Be cautious. And respect your subordinates. Why do people ignore these when it comes to the role of a mother as a manager? People get pregnant casually, have children casually, and raise children casually. They never think about accumulating experience first. Constantly learning. Constantly reflecting on themselves. And respecting their subordinates. Now, I understand. At the end of the month, Jeremias, who had been missing for 3 months, finally came home. He transferred 30 yuan to me and said ingratiatingly, Honey, I'll turn over a new leaf. Let's not get divorced. Okay? I looked at him. Others say he's a good man who spends time with his children when he's free. But he disappeared for 3 months. The total time he spent with children over the years probably doesn't add up to a year. And he even said this is called effective companionship. I shook my head. No. I want a divorce. And I don't want the children. During this period, I thought carefully about the intention of God letting me be reborn. I roughly understand now. He wanted me to know that I also had mistakes. Due to poverty and business. I was always anxious. I couldn't control my emotions, and often got angry at the children. I would launch into long-winded lectures at every turn and always complain with lines like, I don't divorce for your sake, and I'm really so hard-working. The 2 children were timid. Their grades were terrible. And they didn't amount to much when they grew up. Life started to decline inevitably from then on. After Jeremias died, I didn't handle the property division well. And I was also too extreme in the children's marriages. I wasn't a qualified mother. Staying here, I would never be happy. Nor could I treat the children calmly. The root of everything is money. So I might as well leave. Work hard to make money. And adjust my mood. When I'm ready, I'll bring the 2 children back by my side and raise them well according to God's will. Hearing my decision, Jeremias was shocked and said, "What? Grace? You really want a divorce? And you don't want the children?" I nodded. "Yes, having fulfilled my obsession. You'll take care of the children from now on." "But how can I take care of the children? Aren't you the children's father? If I can take care of them, why can't you?" "I'm at work. Don't I work either? My salary is high. Does a low salary mean I should stay at home and take care of the children? If I don't take care of the children, my salary will increase." Jeremias and I started arguing again. He didn't want to divorce. I was determined to get a divorce. Jeremias said, "Let's think it over carefully." Soon, let out a low sigh. He ran away again on the pretext of a business trip. No one wants to be the thankless one who takes care of the children. I didn't hesitate. I used the remaining money at home to hire a nanny and packed my things to leave. Mom, having fulfilled my sigh. "Where are you going?" My daughter, who was a bit older and could read people's expressions, looked at me uneasily. I said, "Mom is also going on a business trip." My son asked, "When will Mom come back?" The 2 children seemed to want to say something but held back, looking timid. This scene was so familiar. Suddenly, I remembered peeking at my daughter's diary in my previous life. She wrote that Mom was always angry. And there was a hint of dislike in her words. I was deeply hurt when I saw that. At that time, overcome by emotions, I talked about how hard I had worked while my children disliked me, and condemned her for being unfilial. My daughter didn't dare to say a word. It seemed that such things had happened many times. But I had forgotten about them. I only remembered that I was very tired, busy every day, giving everything for my children, prioritizing all the good things for them, and feeling extremely wronged. Perhaps I was wrong from the very beginning. I came to my senses, squatted down, stroked the heads of the 2 children, smiled, and said gently, "When you come back in the future, you 2 have to be good." The 2 children nodded vigorously. I stood up with a complex mood, picked up the suitcase, and left. Jeremias would leave. And so would I. I was hesitant and reluctant to part with the children before. So I didn't divorce and trapped myself completely. In the end, I raised ungrateful children. I always tried to have the best of both worlds, but ended up pleasing neither side. This time, I must be decisive. My mother-in-law, apart from her poor health, is quite reliable and won't mistreat the children. There won't be any major problems leaving the children with her. The moment I walked out of the house, I looked back at the familiar building, my heart filled with mixed feelings. I quickly turned my head and left resolutely. After that, I rented a house, worked seriously, and tried hard to learn to be a manager. After work, I would find time to read books and go online to collect the confessions of children who hated their parents. The more I saw, the more I could realize my own problems. But I still felt torn in my heart. I had clearly given so much, worked so hard for so long, and truly had the children's best interests at heart. Could it be that just because I made some mistakes, I had to be extremely hated by the children? Under a post complaining about a mother's excessive control, someone replied like this: "You're asking too much of your mother. Since you were born, you needed your mother to breastfeed you every 2 hours. Always wanted her to hold you. And would cry when you couldn't see her. You trained your mother like training a dog, making her pay attention to you and take care of you all the time. You trained your mother like this for more than 10 years. She got used to it and put all her heart and soul into you. But then, when you grew up, you suddenly told her to stay away and not interfere with you. Do you think she can do it all of a sudden?" The blogger replied, "There's never been any suddenness. When a mother is pregnant, the child is one with her. From the moment the child is born, the separation between mother and child is inevitable. When a child is young, he really can't do without his mother. But as the child grows up, he doesn't need his mother to breastfeed him every 2 hours or take care of him all night long. When going to kindergarten, the child is away from the mother for a long time every day. When the child develops self-awareness, he will reject his parents' arrangements. One thing after another, the child has long been telling the mother that we are destined to separate. If after so many years, the mother still hasn't learned to withdraw her control and get used to the separation, and it's the mother's problem. After reading this comment, I was deeply touched. Perhaps I had been too eager for returns before, pinning my emotions on the children, thus putting so much pressure on them. It wasn't that the children couldn't do without me, but that I couldn't do without the children. Having the ability to make oneself happy and paying attention to oneself is the right way to be a mother. Because children are always moving away, leaving, and don't want someone to tie a leash on them. A mother learning to pay attention to herself and make herself happy means letting go of the leash and allowing the child to leave. At this moment, I understood the meaning described in that parenting book. After that, I worked hard and my performance was outstanding. During this period, Jeremias found that I really didn't take care of the children and came to me several times. I firmly said, divorce. Compromising for the sake of the children ultimately hurt myself and the children. In my previous life, the children once asked me to divorce when I was complaining. Every time I refused, saying, "What do you know? Can divorce be so casual?" The children showed expressions of discomfort, but didn't dare to persuade me more. At that time, there seemed to be many reasons not to divorce. Now I realize that they were all shackles I put on myself. Jeremias still didn't want to divorce. We were at a stalemate. One day, the manager came to me and asked, "Are you willing to be sent on an assignment?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, I am." Being sent on an assignment might mean becoming the manager of a branch company. And I would never give up this opportunity. He said, "But you have 2 children. Won't you take care of your family?" I said, "There's the grandmother and the nanny." The manager was reassured. Jeremias got the news and called me anxiously. "I'm on a business trip." You're also on a business trip. What about the children?" I said. "Figure it out yourself. If you can go on a business trip, why can't I?" "Grace, this isn't good for the children." "Then don't go on a business trip and go home to take care of the children." Jeremias tried to persuade me earnestly. I said, "Let's get a divorce." Jeremias said, "Do we really have to do this?" I said coldly. "I borrowed 100 yuan on an online loan to hire a nanny. If you don't divorce me, I'll continue to borrow usury. Up to 1 million yuan. And you'll have to pay it back then." With that, I hung up the phone. If he can borrow money online, can't I? In my previous life, I always covered for him when considering the family. Now I realize that I didn't have to. I could have avoided so much pain. Many of my grievances were self-inflicted, and I had imposed all the debts on the children, demanding their return. It got to this point, and Jeremias finally agreed to divorce. The whole process dragged on for more than half a year. When I got the divorce certificate, I was surprised that the cover of the certificate was actually red, looking very festive. Walking out of the door, the sky was clear, and everything seemed brand new. After the divorce, Jeremias finally took on the responsibility of a father. He tried every means to transfer back to this city and went home to take care of the children every day. I sent alimony on time every month. My days in Guangcheng were fulfilling and happy. I had money and no longer wronged myself. I could buy clothes whenever I wanted and travel whenever I wanted. Before, I always put myself behind the children, didn't enjoy life, and felt aggrieved. Now that I had done what I had wanted to do before, after the novelty wore off, I found it was just so. If I had found the opportunity to buy clothes for myself and take time to travel before, perhaps I would have understood that the things I had been longing for were just like this, and I wouldn't have been so resentful. But at that time, I always thought I had to save money for the children and prepare for the future. I was constantly anxious about money and didn't want to travel. Then I felt wronged, thinking that I had given so much, and often nagged in front of the children. Looking back now, I was also at fault. In the year in Guangcheng, I gradually grew up. I reconsidered my relationship with the children. After reorganizing some overlooked details, I found that the truth might not be what I thought. The children didn't completely abandon me. After Jeremias died, they would come back to visit me during festivals, and occasionally called to send their regards. But the conversations were always very short, because I was always worried about them and kept nagging. As a result, a number of times they came back and called became fewer and fewer. There was a period when my daughter gave birth and my son was busy with work, so they didn't come home for the spring festival. This made me very upset. When they came back with gifts on the 5th day of the Lunar New Year, I cried and accused them of being unfilial, and also listed the things like they usually didn't come home or call. It ended up being very unpleasant. At that time, I was righteous. Not coming home for the spring festival was their fault, right? I was so wronged. So why couldn't I accuse them? But now thinking about it, just because I'm in the right, do I have to be aggressive? I'm currently a manager, in charge of nearly 100 people. When my subordinates make mistakes sometimes, even if I'm so angry that my liver hurts, I will try to choose my words carefully, because I know the consequences of offending people. Why was I so unrestrained with my children? I always said my children were unfilial. But they broke up with their ex-boyfriends as I asked, gave up their dreams, and came back to work in this city. My daughter finally tried hard to go on blind dates and get married under my pressure. My son also got promoted and raised his salary as I expected. If they really hated me from the bottom of their hearts, I'm afraid they would have run away like the supervisor did. I gradually figured everything out. I started to reconcile with myself and with the children. A year later, I flew back to see the children. Jeremias saw me and greeted me friendly. "Grace, you're back?" His tone was relaxed, as if we were old friends. I said, "Yeah. I'm here to see the children." He called out the 2 children, left the space for us, and went out to buy groceries and cook. In my imagination, he should hate me, being angry about taking care of the children alone and often losing his temper. But when I saw him today, he didn't show any resentment and greeted me with a smile. He was polite and distant. I thought vaguely that perhaps my previous thought that the children were biased toward their father and it was unfair to me was wrong. Jeremias wasn't completely useless. At least his temper was better than mine. I asked the children how their father was to them, and the children answered honestly. Jeremias raised the children rather roughly. When he was annoyed, he would also shout at the children and even spank their butts. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard that. So his good temper was real. But there was also a limit. Indeed, anyone taking care of 2 children would get annoyed. As for his rough way of raising children, I would have been angry before. But now I couldn't be bothered to comment. Anyway, it didn't concern me. So whatever. I took the children out to play for a day. "Mom, hadin so filled my head sorry. I love you so much." On the way home in the evening, my daughter kissed my cheek. "Mom, can you not leave?" My son was reluctant to let me go. I was silent for a moment and said, "Mom has to work. But Mom will come to see you often in the future. When there's a holiday, I'll pick you up to play in Guangcheng. Okay?" "Okay." The 2 children answered in unison. On the way, had they fulfilled my end session? I asked about their studies. And the 2 children became nervous all of a sudden. I smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if you don't do well in studies, as long as you're happy." My son said in a low voice, "I got 85 points. But everyone else got over 90 points. I said, "The difference between 85 and 90 points isn't that big. Just make a little effort and you can reach it. Jagger is really great." My son immediately puffed out his little chest. My daughter said, "Mom, heading fulfilled my ansai. I think math is so difficult." I said, "Mom can sign you up for a tutoring class. Do you want that?" My daughter was hesitant. I didn't force her. "Tell me when you want it. If you don't, that's okay too. Thank you. Mom." My daughter hugged me. "I really don't care about their grades now. Because in my previous life, I focused so much on their studies, was extremely stressed every day. But the children's grades were still poor. They were also quite dissatisfied with me. Anyway, the result was the same, so it's better to let them be happy. After staying for 5 days, I went back to Guangcheng to continue working. I thought about making a fortune with the knowledge from my rebirth, but when I really wanted to put it into practice, my mind went blank. All the memories about making money were erased. It seems that God doesn't allow me to make a fortune relying on my memories of the future. Well, then I'll work earnestly and live a stable life. I'm really hardworking. The benefits of my current company are excellent. My salary has been increasing steadily, and the year-end bonus is quite substantial. I often fly back home to see my children, buy them gifts, and chat with them. I give them enough pocket money so that they won't be anxious about material things. I'll monitor how they spend the money to prevent them from squandering it. Whether it's gifts or money, I distribute them fairly without showing favoritism. Now I realize that spending a lot on buying gifts and giving pocket money to the children doesn't cost much in total. Unfortunately, in my previous life, I was always stingy, trying to save a few pennies, which made the children feel bad, grow up with low self-esteem, and also become stingy. Now that I strongly support them, the 2 children are very confident and show no signs of competing with others in a bad way. I'm grateful to Jeremias for this. Although he raised them in a rough way, he didn't neglect their education. During the holidays, the children come to Guangcheng to have fun. Our relationship is very harmonious. 2 years later, I made a suggestion to Jeremias sell his premarital house and buy a larger 4-bedroom apartment. Jeremias was hesitant. He had always wanted to move to a bigger house. I'll contribute 500 yuan. You don't need to pay me back. But there's one condition. The house must be registered in the names of the 2 children. I'm paying but not living in it. They can live in it. Jeremias agreed on the spot for such a good deal. After buying the house, I told the children. The children were very grateful. Finally, heading to Seoul. They each have their own independent rooms. I didn't push them to study. Yet their grades are actually better than in the previous life, especially my daughter, who often gets the first place in exams. She was extremely anxious about maintaining her first place position. I tried to persuade her to relax instead. She, like me in the previous life, was trapped in the self-drawn siege, insisting that if she couldn't get into a prestigious university, her future would be bleak. After trying hard but not getting good grades, she broke down and cried, feeling extremely wronged. I tried to comfort her. It's okay if you don't get the first place or don't get into a 985 university. With your grades, you can at least get into an undergraduate university. She got angry. You don't understand at all. Stop meddling. Okay? I wasn't angry at all when my daughter lost her temper. Nor did I feel wronged. Because I realized that many people say things out of emotion. Not because they really mean it. It's not about being unfilial. I stood up and hugged her. It doesn't matter if you can't get into a good school. Mom has money and can support you for a lifetime. My daughter was stunned for a moment. Then hugged me and cried. Sorry. Mom. I didn't want to say that just now. I patted her on the back. Mom knows. You were just in a bad mood. My daughter sobbed. After that, my daughter's anxiety was significantly alleviated. My son is not good at studying, and he doesn't like to talk to me as much as my daughter does. I didn't force him. Nor would I often blame him by saying, "Why don't you tell me anything?" Because I realize that boys' thinking is different from girls'. They are very proud and think that it's embarrassing to confide and show weakness. I said, "If you have any troubles, you can talk to your dad. If you need to ask me for help, Mom is always welcome." My son mumbled with his head down. Got it. Got it. In the past, I would have couldn't help scolding. What kind of attitude is this? Now I don't care at all. He just doesn't talk much. Not that he's resisting me. I won't wrong myself to please them anymore. If I want to have a big meal, I'll have one. If I want to buy something, I'll buy it. If I want to travel, I'll go. Even if they are in the final exams and I want to leave, I just tell them and then go. This went on for 10 years. Our relationship is very harmonious. I no longer think about whether they are filial or not. Whether they are filial has nothing to do with me. I'm already preparing for my own old age care. It would be great if they are filial. And if not, it doesn't matter. I won't ask them like I did in the previous life. Does mom treat you well? When mom gets old in the future, will you dislike me? I used to be very happy when the children said they wouldn't dislike me. But when they ignored me, I would be very sad. I won't be sad for a long time just because they don't call me or come to visit. I won't look forward to their appearance every day. I won't rack my brains over their affairs. Keep talking to them and giving advice, only to annoy them. Many years passed. And I retired. Jeremias was seriously ill. We had already divorced. So of course, it wasn't my responsibility to take care of him. The children took care of him and also hired nurses and nannies. I had nothing to do with the whole process. My daughter was admitted to one of the top-ranked schools. After graduating from postgraduate school, she stayed in a big city, had a high income, and fell in love and settled down with an equally outstanding senior. My son also went to work in a big city and was still unmarried after Tito. I didn't urge him. If you're not ready to enter marriage and have children recklessly, it will end up being bad for both adults and children. The fact that he doesn't want to get married means he's not ready. The conditions of the 2 children are much better than in the previous life. I just do what I want. One day, when I was climbing a mountain, I fell down and passed out directly. In the darkness, I saw the scene before my death in the previous life. On that day, after overhearing that the children didn't want to treat my illness and hoped I would die soon, I started a hunger strike. The children were in a hurry and said, "Mom, eat something." I ignored them. Later, I passed out. My daughter complained, "What on earth does mom want to do to torture us? What does she really want?" My son said, "Isn't she always like this? Stubborn. Getting angry and going to extremes without any discussion. Who asked us to have such a mom? Just consider ourselves unlucky." The doctor entered the room and asked them if they were willing to continue the treatment. The 2 children looked unlucky and were clearly reluctant. But finally, they pinched their noses and said, "We still have to treat her." I was a bit surprised. I thought they would surely send me to the crematorium right away. A few days later, I died completely. The 2 children hugged me and cried, constantly calling, "Mom." I felt mixed emotions. It was true that they disliked me, hated me, and hoped I would die. But it was also true that they spent money on my treatment. And they were sad when I died. Human nature is complex. After being reborn, I had always minded the fact that they had shirked responsibility and didn't want to take care of me, and even hoped I would die. Seeing this, I was completely relieved. The scene changed, and I was back to being a child. Seeing the neighbor who raised dogs. She was still walking to dogs. No longer shouting and scolding. The dogs were much more docile than before. I asked, "Auntie, didn't you say you were going to send the dogs away?" The aunt said, "I sent them away before. Both were sent to the countryside. But later I made some money, rented a big house, and brought them back. I couldn't bear to part with either of them." She reminded me, "If you want to raise 2 dogs, you need to have a good financial foundation and a strong psychological quality. Otherwise, don't raise 2 dogs easily." I smiled in a complicated way. Suddenly, it went dark in front of me. When I opened my eyes, I saw 2 enlarged, concerned faces. "Mom, are you okay?" the 2 children said in unison. I said, "I'm fine." "Why are you back?" my daughter complained. "You fell down. How could we not come back?" My son also complained. "You're an old lady. Why do you often go climbing? Do you know how old you are? Isn't your health important?" I said, Oh, I know. They were worried and kept telling me not to go climbing again in the future. I agreed. The 2 of them stayed to take care of me. I had a fracture and needed to be hospitalized for a month. I didn't want to burden them, man. Go back to work. I'm almost okay now. The nurse can take care of me. My daughter had a heavier workload. My son persuaded her to go back and said that he planned to resign and come back to take care of me. My daughter said. And I'll cover the medical expenses. My son didn't decline. The two of them discussed things and were very dedicated. On the day my daughter left, she brought water into the ward and quietly gossiped with us. Do you know? There's an old lady in the next ward who has cancer. Her children don't want to take care of her and left her alone at home. Something happened to her. My son said. Really? My daughter said. Yes. I heard that the old lady lost her husband when she was young and lived alone. When she got cancer, she wanted to live with her children, but neither of the two children wanted her. The old lady lived in an old house alone. She fell down. If the neighbor hadn't found her in time, she would have died long ago. My son cursed. What ungrateful wretches. My daughter nodded. Exactly. How can there be such heartless children in the world? The two of them condemned the two children for being unfilial, and felt sorry for the old lady. Listening to their words, I felt both amused and sad, and my mind was a bit distracted. Recalling all the things in the previous life, I had mixed feelings. When I thought carefully, my memories became blurry. Huh? What did they do before I died? My son took care of me for a month. After I was discharged from the hospital, he directly lived in my house. Because he likes me more. I didn't stay in Guangcheng later and came back. My son lived in my house for half a year, preparing for the civil service exam. Finally, handing fulfilled wide sigh. He was admitted to the unit he was in the previous life. Huh? Previous life? What previous life? I thought carefully but couldn't remember anything. My son has been staying in my house. Occasionally staying at his dad's house for a while. He said that since he's not married, he doesn't want to waste money renting a house or buying one. My daughter flies back during holidays and even brings my grandson back. The child is very cute. I like him very much and am a bit reluctant to let the child go. After my daughter goes back, she calls me on video every day so that I can see my grandson. I'm so happy that I can't stop smiling. Occasionally, in my dreams, I vaguely remember that the children were unfilial and sorry to me. But when I wake up, I feel confused. Clearly, the two children are very filial. Why would I have such a dream? Many years passed again. Jeremias had already died. And I was getting very old. I was sent to the hospital. When I woke up occasionally, I heard the children crying softly. I opened my eyes. Why are you crying? The two children's eyes were red. Mom, don't leave. Okay? If you leave, we'll be children without a mom. I said. You're already so old and still need a mom. How embarrassing. The two children started crying again. Don't cry. Be happy. I smiled and touched their heads. They were both old people, but they were still crying like children. My son-in-law, daughter-in-law, along with my grandson and my grandson's partners came in to say goodbye to me. We've gotten along well over the years. Everyone was there. The ward was crowded with people. Looking at their concerned faces, I closed my eyes contentedly. It's so nice. It's really nice.